great mission to bring order to a lawless universe.
A hero is only as good as the villains they fight, but what happens when the hero themselves becomes the villain? Well, this story arc exists for almost all the great superheroes out there, be it Marvel or DC. A fine example of it was explored in the comic Superman, the Darkseid, and once again in a couple of Superman the Animated Series episodes, in which Superman ends up becoming the son of Darkseid, instead of his two loving human parents. In this video, we're going to deep dive into the comics before exploring the animated series. So, without further ado, let's begin this intergalactic ride. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means an awful lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Number 1. The Son of Apocalypse. Thousands of years before the destruction of Krypton, the Kryptonians abandoned their old gods and their religions. Instead of the gods, the Kryptonians put their faith in technology and science, in the hopes that their innovations would bring the universe to their feet. But I suppose the Kryptonians bit off more than they could chew. In their failed attempt to harness the energy of the Red Sun, they unintentionally initiated a chain reaction that caused the Red Sun to explode. And just like that, the ingenious race of Kryptonians ceased to exist. However, two of these Kryptonians refused to accept the fate and impending destruction that was about to fall upon them. This couple hurriedly prepared the means by which their species and culture might have a chance at survival. They secured their infant child in the Matrix chamber and launched it into the depths of space. The spacecraft traveled across several galaxies at speeds greater than that of light and headed for the third planet of a yellow and young sun. However, the infant's interstellar journey does not conclude on Earth because of unknown forces that conspired to divert the craft's planetary touchdown. Through a rift between dimensions, the spacecraft reached the smoke and sulfur-infested planet of Apocalypse, which was the hellish world ruled by an unforgiving god named Darkseid. Kal-El is found by a couple of lowly workers of Apocalypse, who quickly learn about the child's powers and plan to give him to Granny Goodness, a most evil woman who ran an orphanage on Apocalypse. But before they could do that, the god of evil presented himself and burned the couple to ashes. It turned out it was actually Metron who ensured that the future Superman was brought to Apocalypse so that he could serve as a loyal and the most powerful servant of Darkseid, who says, "The infant neither cries nor shrinks from my touch, and he gazes at me without the slightest glimmer of fear. Few who have stood before Darkseid can make such a claim." And it was evident that Darkseid wished to turn the child into an engine of destruction that would be fired throughout the universe. The next few panels elaborate upon the story of Isaiah, the Highfather, New Genesis, and Scott Free. Some of you may already know that before the arrival of the new gods, such as Highfather and Darkseid, there were the old gods who lived on a planet called Urgrund. But this world was destroyed, and it led to the birth of two new and opposite planets. The first of them was New Genesis, which was a world of light and everything good. On the other hand, Apocalypse was more of a dark and dystopian planet, where people were subjected to all kinds of torture. These two planets found themselves in a constant state of war, and as a peace treaty, Metron suggested that the rulers of the two planets should exchange their firstborn sons. Hence, Darkseid adopted Isaiah's son, Scott Free, while Darkseid's son, Orion, was adopted by Isaiah. The reason I bring this up is because we see Scott Free, or Mr. Miracle, being chased by Darkseid's parademons. He had stolen a boom tube generator in a desperate attempt to escape the desolate world. For those of you who don't know, a boom tube is a device that lets you travel anywhere in the universe. On his way out, Scott is stopped by Big Barda, the woman who would later become Mr. Miracle's wife. Darkseid's loyal henchman Darkseid rushes to Darkseid and tells him about the theft, but Darkseid tells Darkseid that he would allow Scott to escape because it would break the long-standing pact between Apocalypse and New Genesis. When Darkseid asks if he had managed to brainwash Mr. Miracle into killing Isaiah, Darkseid says, "The instrument of New Genesis's destruction lies in this subterranean chamber. I cannot thank Metron enough for bringing the Star Child to Apocalypse." Darkseid was talking about Superman, who had grown into an adult. Superman's present form and build were such that he could easily pass as one of the new gods, but he wasn't a god. He was simply a weapon, that Darkseid had nurtured for years, a merciless and deadly being who was loyal only to Darkseid and was supposed to be the true son of Apocalypse. But without the yellow sun, how was Superman so powerful on Apocalypse, which was a dark planet? Well, Darkseid had built him a suit that served as a conduit which drew geothermal energy from the core of Apocalypse. This energy was absorbed by Superman to give him immeasurable strength and stamina. At this point, Superman expressed how he wished to prove himself in combat, so his dear adoptive father brought him to a gladiatorial match where he was to fight Kalibak, another son of Darkseid. The battle was being attended by every stratum of the Society of Apocalypse, including Metron, all united in their bloodlust. Darkseid was giving Superman a fairly melodramatic entry here, something which even Metron pointed out. And there he was, rising from fire, as if a small sun had come to life. Superman revealed his presence to Kalibak, and a fierce battle ensued. Kalibak launched an attack, but Superman easily dodged him. However, he grabbed the fallen son of Krypton by his ankle and threw him against a wall, shattering it to bits. Kalibak, the unholy spawn of Darkseid and a witch, charged at Superman once again, but this time around, Superman showed Kalibak who was boss. He pinned Kalibak, who looked to his father for mercy, but the evil new god ordered Superman to kill Kalibak. Later, we meet scot-free once again making another escape attempt when he is stopped by Superman, who was asked by Darkseid to keep an eye on Scott. Darkseid's son of Apocalypse beats the young new god left, right, and center, but scot-free was called the best escape artist of the universe, not without reason. He manages to use the boom tube and fled the scene. Superman then comes to his father, begging for forgiveness, but Darkseid tells him that he should not repeat the mistake of failing. He then shows Superman the Omega Warhead, which he wanted to use on New Genesis. The payload could not be carried by any conventional craft for the fear of its detection, but Darkseid had a plan to ensure that didn't happen. If we mounted it on a conventional missile, perhaps, but that is why you will deliver the warhead to New Genesis personally. It wasn't long before Darkseid's parademons and forces attacked New Genesis. Superman followed his adoptive father's orders and brought the Omega Warhead to the core of New Genesis, detonating the device, which destroyed the planet. The Omega waves erupted from the core and washed across the planet like a storm of pure destruction. Oceans turned to deserts, forests were petrified, and no living thing was spared. Only a handful of new gods from New Genesis survived. Highfather reveals that he had transported as many new gods as he could to Earth. However, Highfather himself remains on New Genesis so that he could meet Superman. He tells Superman his true history and why Darkseid kept it a secret, but Superman wouldn't believe it, and he attacked Highfather, only to be shown his place by the mighty new god. He takes Superman to the Source Wall, and Superman is forced to believe Highfather and everything he said about Krypton and who Superman really was. Highfather becomes one with the Source Wall, but not before ensuring that Superman is sent to Earth, where he would be given an opportunity to choose a different path, a new destiny, a path that would lead to peace and protection instead of war and destruction. Superman crashes into the sea, and the cold seawater leaves his energy dissipated, making him weak and stuck under the weight of his armor. Superman removes most of his armor but falls unconscious. However, he's saved by a woman who turns out to be none other than Lois Lane. It's a little surprising that the petite young woman is able to pull this giant alien hero out of the ocean when he still has some of his armor on. Superman doesn't quite understand where he is, but Lois brings him up to speed. Meanwhile, Darkseid believes that Superman died because of the Omega Wave, but their paths would cross again, as Darkseid's next plan is to kill the surviving new gods, who were also sent to Earth by Highfather. Number 2. Homecoming. After saving Kal-El's life, Lois Lane started questioning him. You know, the usual reporter stuff. But Kal-El also had a million questions about the place where he was now. He asked Lois weird questions, for instance, Metropolis, is that this world's name? What pantheon rules this planet? Lois tried to understand from Kal-El his background and how he ended up in Metropolis, and the honest alien tells her everything about how Highfather took him to the Source Wall, etc. But clearly, Lois believed he was just another lunatic that Metropolis had managed to somehow attract. She left the strange man behind and left to cover a supposed arms deal involving the Intergang. Clearly, her reporter's instincts had failed her. She was so engrossed with one story that she overlooked an even bigger one. Kal-El wasn't some loony who belonged to Arkham or some other asylum, but he was an extraterrestrial, the man who would save Earth over and over again. It wasn't before long that the night ended, and Kal-El experienced his first ever sunrise. The leader of Intergang, villain, Karl Mannheim, was cracking a deal with one of Darkseid's henchmen. In exchange for apocalyptian weaponry, he was to serve a future cause of Darkseid. Meanwhile, Lois was witnessing these strange events unfold. She clicked a picture, but the flash was heard by the criminals, who soon apprehended her. Mannheim was pointing a gun at Lois and would have pulled the trigger had it not been for Kal-El, who mysteriously arrived at the spot to save his savior. The Son of Apocalypse was unarmed, but more than a match for Mannheim and his men. However, Mannheim shot Kal-El, making him bleed, something that Kal-El found to be most strange. Just about then, the Metropolis Special Crimes Unit arrived and arrested the Intergang members. Detective Maggie Sawyer and Commander Dan Turpin of the SCU find that most of the Intergang boys were knocked unconscious, and clearly it was the work of Kal-El. Turpin didn't assess the situation all too well and tried to get physical with Kal-El, something that ended horribly for Turpin, who found himself thrown like a ragdoll. The rest of the team managed to momentarily subdue the alien hero, and Sawyer took the opportunity to tase him. Kal-El was cuffed and immediately taken to an SCU vehicle. However, the bugs from New Genesis were looting food from a corner market, and the ensuing chaos forced the truck to hit a pole, bringing Kal-El back to consciousness. Lois's volatile savior got the chance to escape custody by destroying the reinforced doors of the transport vehicle. Kal fled from the scene and unleashed chaos on everything near him. He seemed uncontrollable and haunted by something from his recent past. He was feeling the weight of his actions on New Genesis. Kal had destroyed countless innocent lives on Darkseid's orders. Yes, he was fighting a war, and his actions should not bear any weight, but still they were bringing him down. He was feeling remorseful. But why was this happening? A couple of bystanders, namely a young boy named Jimmy and his elderly friend Bibbo, decided to do something about Kal, who clearly needed to be calmed down. Bibbo goes up to him and tries to talk him into calming down, and it works like a charm. Kal-El opened up like a little girl to Bibbo and said, "I have destroyed an entire world. Why does it weigh so heavily upon me? It was war." The two humans get Kal an overcoat so the alien could blend in and escape the scene. Meanwhile, Darkseid learned that the anti-life equation had been solved by the Kryptonians, and the secret lay in the very person of Kal-El, the young soldier whom Darkseid had sent to die on New Genesis. Furthermore, Darkseid kills Metron upon learning that he had hidden information. Back at the SCU headquarters, the cops learn the power of the weapons they had seized from the Intergang arms deal. Lois says, "My lord, if Intergang's carrying this kind of firepower, how are the police going to defend themselves?" Which is when Lex Luthor makes his presence known. Lex Luthor, the man who turned a small medical research firm into a multi-billion-dollar biotech giant, has previous knowledge of alien presence on Earth. In fact, he had in his possession the carcass of a parademon that had been shot down by one of his choppers. It became clear to those involved that even the weapons they had confiscated were of alien origin, and unfortunately for everyone, only Luthor seemed to have some knowledge about whatever was going on. On the other hand, Kal-El, the Son of Apocalypse, tasted his first ever burger and was mind blown by its taste. The panel seems to make it look like he was almost orgasmic at that point. Anyways, the yellow sun had started to show its positive effects on Kal-El. He wasn't as pale as he seemed earlier, and even his gunshot wound had healed miraculously. Just about then, they were interrupted by a man named Gus, who brought news about a free medical clinic being ravaged by someone or something. Bibbo and Jimmy took Kal along with them to the clinic and wanted to help. However, Kal didn't understand why this edifice concerned them. Having spent his life on Apokolips and under Darkseid's tutelage, he didn't know what it meant to help people or why one should be good. Nevertheless, Bibbo asks Kal what kind of a world would it be if nobody was willing to lend a helping hand. And to that question, Kal had no answers. Was he transforming into Superman, the savior of the innocent? Bibbo saved 3 kids from the burning building, one of whom mentioned something about a monster on the upper floor. Kal-El decided to investigate the claim. He was shocked to find a parademon and a new god battling each other. And although the parademon had managed to slay Fastback, Kal-El killed the parademon and rescued the doctor, but not before taking the new god's mother box, which should have self-destructed upon his death, but didn't. In fact, Kal could hear the device speaking to him in the beautiful cosmic symphony-like voice. Kal-El was hailed a hero for saving the good doctor's life, something he hadn't experienced previously during all those years he spent on Apokolips. Alerted by the motion, good old Lois Lane arrived and wasn't really surprised to find Kal-El at the center of things. She takes him to a corner to learn more about him and the world he came from, but ends up knowing things that shock her to death. Kal-El tells Lois it appears the new gods escaped the destruction of their planet, as have the forces of Apocalypse, and if Darkseid wants this world, he will have it. Lois is quick enough to deduce that the enemy of an enemy is a friend, and she asks if Kal knew where the new gods were, which he did, courtesy of the recently acquired Mother Box. They go to Lowy Island to meet the new gods, where a few of Darkseid's henchmen, including Big Barda, are present. But the tussle grows more violent when the new gods arrive. The bad guys flee, and Orion attacks Kal-El, but everyone gets into a state of shock when the Mother Box protects Kal and becomes one with him. Speaking to Kal, the Mother Box says, "You have a great destiny to fulfill, then you will require my protection no more." But Orion calls this whole thing blasphemous and a deception birthed by Darkseid. However, Lightray calms him down and asks Kal-El to fight alongside the new gods. Having their base compromised, the new gods leave in search of a new base of operations, and Big Barda tries to convince Kal to use his better judgment and return to Darkseid's cause. And despite Lois Lane begging him not to leave, he goes with Big Barda. Lois Lane rushes to LexCorp Laboratories to update them about the evolving situation and how Earth has been chosen as the battleground between the good and evil new gods. However, Lex knows about it and demonstrates to her the technology and weapons he has been building for a few months now. But how? Well, after Scott Free managed to escape the wrath of Kal on Apocalypse, he came straight to Lex Luthor. Scott offered Lex the Apocalypse technology in exchange for full use of LexCorp resources. But why did a new god need a human's help? Well, his legs were crushed by Kal during the escape, and the journey through the boom tube exacerbated it. Meanwhile, Kal-El and Barda went looking for the rest of his armor, but it had been stolen by Luthor's men. In fact, he had managed to integrate apocalyptian tech into his own work. Once again, a battle ensued between Kal and the men that Luthor had sent in high-tech suits. They attacked with a boom tube and sent him to a prison that Scott and Luthor had crafted specially for Kal. They managed to use a neurotoxin on him to render him paralyzed, and used another gas that solidified into an unbreakable polymer, trapping Kal-El. However, Darkseid arrived and killed Luthor before offering the Mobius chair to Scott. Furthermore, he took Kal-El with him to Apocalypse, where Darkseid extracted the anti-life equation, which was encoded in Kal's ribosomal protein sequence. The issue ends with Darkseid calling a meeting of the aristocracy to plan the invasion of Earth. Number 3. Son vs. Father. The attack on Metropolis began before daybreak on Sunday, and by nightfall, the city had fallen to the hordes of Apocalypse. Though the soldiers and civilians fought valiantly against the evil invaders, the earthly defense was not nearly enough. While the dog soldiers and parademons routed the outmatched human resistance, the robotic drones assembled the anti-life transmitter, a humongous weapon that would bring the world to its knees once it was activated. If you were hoping for Kal-El to return to Earth as Superman and save the day, well, that didn't happen. In fact, the unholy transmitter was activated, and its global broadcast turned all of mankind helpless and docile against Darkseid and his apocalyptian forces. This was made possible because the transmitter's signals were embedded with the anti-life equation, the effect of which was the immediate obliteration of free will and individual identity. Darkseid's deadly dog soldiers fanned out across the world, leaving its fate and future at the hands of a cruel despot. Back on Apocalypse, Darkseid was preparing to carry out his experiments on Kal-El. But more than that, I guess he was talking Kal-El to death. The superhero made use of the distraction and cut himself free using what they call a laser blade. Now that he was free, Kal-El knew that his purpose was saving lives instead of destroying them, and the first order of business was returning to Earth. Back on Earth, Lois Lane and Bibbo seemed to be two among the very humans who were left unaffected by the transmitter's signal. Bibbo had a metal plate in his head which probably protected him, and as for Lois Lane, she had a mother box with her. However, two of the parademons noted that Lois and Bibbo were unaffected. They chased the humans to a subway, but they were saved because of Lightray. He takes them to the Museum of Natural History, where the other new gods had assembled. While they were fighting the parademons, the dog soldiers had managed to install the transmitter, which explains why they didn't stop the construction. But to make things worse, Lightray doubted his abilities to lead the remaining new gods, and Scott Free, now sitting on Metron's Mobius chair, arrived to tell Orion about the pact that Highfather and Darkseid had signed long ago. Upon learning that he was Darkseid's natural son, Orion couldn't come to terms with with it. He believed that he would lead the New Gods to their doom since he was cursed with Darkseid's blood. He stormed out of the museum. Back on Apokolips, Kal-El was trying to find a way back to Earth, but the boom tube would not recognize his commands. Cruel old Granny Goodness presented herself once again and tried to stop Kal-El, but of course, she was far from a match for the son of Krypton. But unfortunately for him, Big Barda presented herself to Kal-El and suggested that since Darkseid was away, the two of them could run away and conquer another world in glorious battle. But Kal-El reminded her that sooner or later, Darkseid's shadow would fall upon all of the universe if the anti-life equation wasn't taken away from him. Big Barda understood that there was no point in trying to sway him away from the suicidal course of going against Darkseid, but she seemed to have fallen for Kal-El and gave him a kiss along with her cape, which would soon become Superman's trademark symbol. Kal-El had shed his identity as Son of Apokolips forever and joined the New Gods on Earth, leading them to attack Darkseid and destroy his forces or die trying. Superman had taken the battle to Darkseid's forces instead of waiting for an attack on him and his mates. They knew that if they lost that night, they would condemn Earth and thousands more worlds to Darkseid's cruelty. Superman saw Darkseid looking at the battle from a distance, and he flew towards the demon god, thinking that he would end the battle in one clean sweep. But Superman forgot that although Darkseid let his warriors fight for him, he himself was a formidable warrior. But Superman went for the transmitter, only to get attacked by Darkseid's Omega Beam. But it didn't kill Superman because the yellow sun had made him much stronger. The New Gods were fighting a losing battle, but reinforcement came with Orion, who brought with him the bugs of New Genesis. The acid drones destroyed the transmitter from within and shut it down for good, and Orion destroyed the structure with one good blast. After this, Superman and Orion charged upon their so-called father, Darkseid, and their combined strength should have been enough to take Darkseid down. But the ruler of Apokolips had the anti-mother box at his disposal, which he used against his sons. Orion was down, but not Superman. It turns out that Orion depended way too much on his mother box, but Superman was a formidable force in his own right. Superman flew towards Darkseid and knocked him down, but that simply pissed Darkseid off more than he already was. The two of them were now engaging in physical combat, and it seemed like Darkseid was going to destroy Superman. However, Light Ray sacrificed himself to give his life energy to Superman so that he would have enough strength to destroy Darkseid, and the plan worked. In the end, the New Gods and the Bugs created a floating city above Metropolis, and Superman went back to Apokolips to destroy Darkseid's war machines and to bring life to the dead planet. He and Big Barda started ruling the planet, while Lois Lane and Orion fell in love on Earth. And that, my friends, was the story of Apocalyptian Superman. That said, the fourth season of Superman the Animated Series has a two-part episode titled Legacy, which also made Superman the son of Darkseid, but the story was quite a bit different from the comics.
You've done well, son.
Thank you, Father.
Number 4. Darkseid's Legacy. Legacy begins on an unnamed planet on which the denizens fight a fierce battle against the Apocalyptian army. The hosts felt that they won the battle as the invaders halted their attack, but that was far from true. A lone ranger bursts through the ceiling of the ruler's palace, and every force used against him proves futile. Learning that the battle was lost, the ruler of the planet hands his scepter, the symbol of power, to this lone ranger. The soldier then returns to the Armada's mothership and meets Darkseid, who hails him as his son. Upon the removal of his mask, the soldier turns out to be Superman. As a reward for his recent accomplishments, Darkseid tells Superman that he would have a planet of his own to rule. Earth. However, it is all an elaborate scheme by Darkseid, who wants Earth but cannot launch a direct attack because that would bring him into the bad books of Highfather, a risk that Darkseid cannot take. Back on Earth, Superman has gone missing, and Supergirl has been using robots to ensure that the people believed that Superman was still around. But one of the robots' wiring goes haywire, and Supergirl is forced to retrieve it before the truth comes to light. The robot and Supergirl end up at Lex Luthor's office, where it is revealed that Lex knows about Superman's absence and intentionally messed up the robot's wiring. Luthor then goes off to meet General Hardcastle of the military, where it is revealed that Luthor and Hardcastle had been plotting to kill Superman if he ever went rogue. Back on Apokolips, Superman is given an armada of his own by Darkseid so that he can take over Earth. However, he also gave Superman a banner that was similar to the Superman symbol on Earth. So Darkseid wanted Superman to attack Earth and deceive the people into believing that their savior had become their destroyer. And the plan works Lex as was intended. But meanwhile, Lex had been preparing a special weapon to be used against Superman, who was bringing chaos and destruction to Earth's defenses. While attacking another base, Supergirl fights Superman, but he subdues her. He stops only when Lois Lane arrives at the scene and helps him remember everything. So what had happened was the big bad granny from Apocalypse had used her technology to erase Superman's original memories and planted new memories, according to which the son of Krypton landed on Apocalypse and was brought up by Darkseid the Benevolent, who was on a mission to bring peace and order to the universe. Although Superman's memories were now back, he was shot by a kryptonite missile which knocked him and Supergirl out. In this second part of Legacy, Superman is being held by the military in a cell with red light. Luthor knew that red light weakens the Man of Steel, but Lois Lane comes to his rescue and frees him just before Lex Luthor was about to inject Superman with a lethal kryptonite injection. Superman and Lois then rescue Supergirl before leaving the prison. Superman now knows that he has to settle the issue that's Darkseid once and for all, and he leaves for Apocalypse. Here, Darkseid's soldiers attack him, but he easily incapacitates them and heads to Darkseid's castle. The two of them engage in a fierce combat. It initially seemed that Superman would end up losing the fight, but just as Darkseid was about to level Superman with his Omega Beam, Superman covers Darkseid's eyes with his palms, trapping the Omega Beam inside Darkseid's head. Darkseid is grievously injured and falls on Superman's feet. The ensuing commotion attracts the attention of Darkseid's slave workers. Superman assumes that the slaves would do what was necessary, and he throws Darkseid down below. However, they address Darkseid as master and lift him up to take him to safety. Darkseid stops his carriers and tells Superman he may be many things, but on Apocalypse, he was a god. Superman prepares to charge once again, but Supergirl arrives and tells him that if he followed Darkseid's way, someone would die, but that someone would not be Darkseid. Back on Earth, Superman struggles with the fact that he can't even trust himself anymore, that he did lose control and almost annihilated Earth. How would he possibly earn the trust of an entire planet back? But Lois Lane consoles him and says that he should simply earn the trust of one person at a time. The episode ends with them sharing a kiss. So there's our exploration of Superman as the son of Darkseid. I can safely say it's not the best Superman story arc that I've read in a while, but the comics as well as the show are definitely worth your time if you have any love for the Man of Steel. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe out there, and thanks for watching.
Superman.